From New York, Ebro in the morning on Hot 97.
Oh man, we got a doozy today, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, children of all sizes, ages, and colors. I'm not supposed to say sizes or colors. They say
no.
Bad. That's bad.
Everyone.
Everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Mayor de Blasio on the show right now.
Good morning,
Bill
Mayor.
de Blasio.
I thought Ebro was politically correct. Now I'm getting concerned.
I screwed up the intro, man. Yo, Rosenberg, you're not clapping for Mayor de Blasio.
No. The mayor does not recognize me, so there's no need for me to recognize the mayor.
What is this about? What are you talking about?
He's never invited me to Gracie Mansion. Mm-hmm. He doesn't at me.
He did invite you to Gracie Mansion
one time, and I was busy, but he hasn't ever invited me again. You guys are there every week.
Mm-hmm. And then, Rosenberg, look at that sleight of hand there. One time, but I was busy.
I was out of town, Mr. Mayor. I was out of town, and then furthermore,
wait. And last week you were out of town when Laura went. So what are you talking about?
And then what about his last appearance? When Mayor, on the last appearance, you said, "Great talking to at Old Man Ebro at Laura Stiles," as if I wasn't even here.
He's the mayor. He doesn't run his own Twitter.
Do you see how sensitive he is, Mayor?
I want you to know, Rosenberg, you're special.
I was the first one to ever have you up here.
I want you to come to Gracie Mansion sometime when you're not out of town. And I want you to join with us because you're part of this dynamic trio, too.
No, but hold on. Mr. Mayor, that's the problem, though. I'm not part of it, too. I was the first person to ever have you up on the air.
Old stuff. Nobody cares.
Pre-Ebro, before Ebro was on
Nobody
the
cares
show.
anymore.
All right, let's focus, guys.
It's old.
Pre-Ebro, is that like an epoch of history?
Yes.
Pre-Bro.
It's PE.
It's one word now.
All right, well, I'd like to come up there maybe just on a social occasion and watch football together or something.
Well, I need you to.
Well, right. Mayor de Blasio, there's a bit of a, dare I say, a ish storm. Some doo-doo flying around right now because this MTA situation is heated up. Basically, Joe Lota, who claims he's working for $1, I don't believe it. There's always a back door. Somebody's getting paid somewhere. Who's appointed by Cuomo, it comes with a new tab saying it's $800 million to fix the MTA and wants us to pay half of it and basically wants you to pony up $400 million. What do you say, Mayor?
I think, look, first the good news. The good news is I think Joe Lota's a very capable guy. I don't always agree with him, but I think he's a very capable guy. And second, I think this plan has a lot of the right stuff in it. But what I said is very clear. A lot of the money he says he needs is already there in their budget. They can draw on it right now. And the new money they need, the state of New York really should cover because, first of all, it runs the MTA. And second of all, here's the amazing thing. The state of New York took from the MTA budget almost $500 million 2 years. They literally siphoned off money that was meant for the MTA.
$500 million.
Used it for other things. So I say it's very simple. Put that money back, give it to the MTA where it was supposed to go all along, and that takes care of Lota's immediate needs.
All right, so now Rosenberg pointed out a good point earlier, which is for the people riding the train every day, dealing with the frustration, all this political back and forth is frustrating, and it's like, yo, just fix it. What do you say to that?
I think people have every right to be frustrated. You know, I believe people right now in this city who are riding the subways have gotten a horrible, constant experience of being late for work or late to a doctor's appointment or late to pick up their kid. And it's painful and it has to be fixed. But part of what I'm trying to make clear is it begins with responsibility. So the MTA has to take responsibility for its own actions. The state of New York has to take responsibility for the fact it controls the MTA. The state of New York has to take responsibility for the fact it took almost $500 million from the MTA. When you get responsibility and accountability in place, everything else can happen. But the good news is this crisis has drawn the attention to the subways it deserves, and there is a plan now that's a good start. And I'm going to be out there nonstop in the subways reminding the MTA that they have to fulfill their obligations and fix the problem.
How, now, Mayor, I have a question. Because it definitely, to me, Ebro, feels like they're doing this specifically to you because you and Cuomo have issues. And, I mean, many New York mayors and governors of state of New York don't get along. But you guys have issues. You're running for re-election, and they're trying to make this blow up in your face. While on your plate right now is the housing issue, which was handed down to you by Bloomberg and all of that nonsense because everybody in the city was greedy and Bloomberg was making sure everybody was paid. So everybody kept quiet, let Bloomberg run from a third term, and now all this housing stuff's on your plate. You got the MTA stuff on your plate. They're trying to make you look bad, Mayor. What are we doing?
Look, I think you're right that there's a lot of history behind this, whether it's the housing crisis that wasn't addressed, whether it's landlords and developers who were given the freedom to do whatever they want and affordable housing was not created, whether it's the MTA crisis that's been brewing for years. What we're seeing now is just the tip of the iceberg of something that's been developing for years and years and wasn't addressed. So I think you're right about that point. I don't know. On the politics, I think it's simpler, Ebro. I think it's real simple when you're responsible for something to try and distract from your responsibility. I say it all the time. I say, I don't want to pretend that what I'm responsible for. I want to be honest and straightforward. I'm responsible for the schools, for policing, for sanitation, for public housing, for public hospitals. If you got a problem with any of that, come to me. If you like something, that's great. It's about the work me and my team have done. The MTA has to take responsibility for its own work. The state has to take responsibility for its dominance of the MTA. When that happens, all other things are possible. So I actually think it's much more about the inconvenience politically of actually owning up to responsibility. That's what we've seen these last weeks, people trying to evade their responsibilities.
But you do acknowledge, it sounds like indirectly, that they are purposefully doing this during your reelection to try to hurt you in some way.
I honestly don't think that's the core of it, bro. I think it's true that there have been times in the last couple of weeks where we've seen with the governor and the chair of the MTA that they switched their story about who's in charge and who's responsible. Maybe that's got a political underpinning. But I got to say, the core problem is the MTA crisis worsened in the last few months. The endless delays, the track fires, the problems with the signal system, all of the things that weren't addressed before, the chickens came home to roost, and now has turned out to be a full-blown crisis. I think that's what's really running the day here, that this became a physical crisis that millions of New Yorkers are experiencing, and it forced, finally, an honest discussion of accountability and the fact that the state runs the MTA. I can't tell you how many people, I go to town hall meetings, and I ask people, raise your hands, who thinks the city runs the MTA, who thinks the state runs the MTA? It's usually like a mix. The state has run the MTA for decades, but has not wanted people to recognize that fact because it comes with a lot of political inconvenience. And I think the good news here is the accountability and responsibility is finally becoming clear to people.
Got it. So let me take you somewhere else. They're asking for $400 million from New York City taxpayers out of our budget. Is there any wiggle room where you say, let me see the line items of things that you guys are proposing, new signals, new this, new that? What can be affixed immediately to get trains on time? I'm willing to participate in those things that can take place right now. But you're not sticking me up for $400 million or sticking us up for $400 million, and then we don't see any of this stuff fixed for
10
who knows?
years, yeah.
Yeah, I would go even farther. Look, my job is to protect the interests of New Yorkers and New York City taxpayers. So right now, the money the MTA needs is in its budget in large part that they're not yet spending, or it's new money that they should get from the state because, again, the state took almost $500 million out of their coffers and never returned it. It's like if I said to you, hey, can I borrow $20 and I forgot to ever give it back, except it's $500 million, right? so, this is something that has to be addressed. There's no way in hell city taxpayers should cough up money when the state of New York has not even returned to the MTA the money they, quote-unquote, borrowed. So that's point one. Point two is we have another problem here coming down the pike, which started yesterday in earnest. When the Senate voted yesterday on that first step in repealing Obamacare, here's the problem. If they succeed in the coming weeks, the cost to New York City taxpayers over the next few years will be in the billions, literally in the billions, because 1.6, and this all connects, 1.6 million New Yorkers are depending on insurance they got on the Affordable Care Act.
Okay.
If that insurance is no longer available, all those folks, when they go to the hospital and go to any of our public hospitals, they won't have anything to pay with. Taxpayers are going to have to cover them. All the money we get from Medicaid will be undercut. So our public hospitals are struggling right now. It's just one example of how actions in Washington could totally sock us with a huge bill. And that's another reason why I'm not going to spend taxpayers' money lightly when we have these huge challenges coming from the Trump administration. This is just the health care. They're going to do the budget after that and try and cut us on affordable housing and education, all sorts of other things. They're going to do a quote-unquote tax reform, which could really hit New York City hard, because it's just going to be a giveaway to the wealthy.
Well, and De Blasio, let me jump in here, and they're going to come for us because we're a sanctuary city too, which they're going to try to hit us on all these things because we're a sanctuary city.
Exactly, and I got to tell you, when I hear 3 or 4 different ways that the taxpayers in New York City could be losing hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars, it's not an incentive to me to say, hey, let me throw around a lot of money and give away money that we have to hang on to protect against what's happening in Washington, especially when the MTA has resources or the state has resources. Later on, look, there's another discussion about the future, 5, 10, 20 years from now. How are we going to make the MTA work and be sustainable? We'll be at the table for that. We'll be ready to figure out ways to address that. But here and now, I'm going to be tough on the fact that the MTA's got to use its own resources and the state's got to pony up that which they owe.
So you guys heard it. Mayor de Blasio is not wavering at all with this MTA thing. The $400 million is not coming from New York City at all. And we are sitting here waiting to see how this healthcare thing is going to smack us around. And you're saying in the billions.
In the billion, look, you talk about 1.6 million people could lose their insurance, and a public hospital system is struggling as it is. We're going to lose direct money for our hospitals. We're going to have tons of uninsured people needing help. If you walk into an emergency room and you need, thousands of dollars worth of care for one visit, and you have no insurance, guess what? The taxpayers end up covering that.
So what are the
massive scale?
Ebro, breaking news here.
Yes.
Did you see that President Trump tweeted 15 minutes ago that officially the U.S. military will not accept transgender people in any capacity to serve in the military?
15 minutes ago.
15 minutes ago, that was tweeted by Donald Trump. Have you heard?
You can't make it up. You can't make it up, can you?
It's unbelievable. Have you heard anything about that yet, Mayor?
I have not heard it, but I can tell you right away it's disgusting, and I don't get why Donald Trump still thinks it's the 1980s, because when you look at look at what he tried to do with the Central Park 5 back then.
Yep.
He loves to be divisive, and he acts as if this country hasn't evolved since the time he first became an adult. The people of this country get that, and it's certainly in this city, that we got to treat everyone with respect. And more, you're seeing this all over. People want an atmosphere in this country where we respect everyone's identity. And that includes rights for transgender people. And the notion that people who want to serve their country and put their life on the line for their fellow Americans are going to be told you can't because of your identity. We used to have a segregated armed forces based on race.
Yeah.
They used to not allow women to serve. This is the same thing. Donald Trump's got to wake up and smell the coffee. America is way far ahead of him and wants an inclusive society. And I say God bless anyone who is transgender and willing to serve their nation in the military. We should welcome them.
Well, I got news for you guys. Fortunately, I guess a tweet does not mean law. So I'm sure there's some steps here.
Yes.
Shout to Twitter. We all like Twitter, but guess what? Legislation is not passed on Twitter.
I know. I just wanted to bring it up.
I appreciate you. So, de Blasio, what can the people listening do now with regard to this healthcare thing? Because I'm sure people feel hopeless, right? They hopefully have reached out to their senators, their assemblymen, et cetera, et cetera. Is it a sit and wait and see thing? Because yesterday, while they took a first step yesterday, you also saw 9 Republicans move away from and vote no on several things.
Yeah, this ballgame is not over by a long shot. Remember, if the Senate can even agree on a bill, then it has to go back to the House. That's it. So there's another round of voting, and all of these senators and Congress members, this time it's not going to be symbolic votes. When they get up ahead, these are the forever. Once you vote for it, it's on record forever, and all of your constituents who lose health care are going to hold you accountable. And when your hospitals start closing in your district, that's on you. So a lot of these people are going to have to think twice when the final votes are happening. There's a big chance to pressure them. Here's my message. There's 2 things that New Yorkers can do. More and more you see organizations, all the resistance organizations and a huge swath of organizations that are fighting for health care for people are doing phone banks just like you would in the presidential election. There's phone banks going into the key states and key districts where the swing votes are. The second point is that we have an opportunity to reach people, everyone in our lives. Look, in the country, everyone who's listening right now could think about, do you know someone in your life, a friend, a family member, a colleague who lives in Nevada, Arizona, who lives in a place like Ohio, Pennsylvania is going to be a big part of this going forward in the House. Mobilize the people in your life. This is time for personal, direct action. Reach the people in your life in those key states. Tell them they need to reach their senator, too. If people own this issue, they understand it's about their health care, their families, the future of their country. We can make an impact by reaching our whole network with social media and get everyone involved in this fight.
And also understanding how it's going to affect, I think one of the biggest pieces of this is understanding how it affects the overall taxpayer, even if your health care is in a different place than the 1.6 million who need it here in New York City and you have your own health care. Those people needing a solution is going to affect the tax bottom line, which is going to affect other things, such as our ability to spend on schools and improving streets, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly. If you don't give people health insurance, we know one thing for sure. If you don't give people the right to health insurance, you end up with a lot more money being spent. People don't get the care they need. They end up in the emergency room, which costs a lot more. They end up getting a lot sicker and needing a lot more care. It's a very slippery slope, and it always falls to the taxpayer, particularly at the local level. Here's another thing that's going on in this whole healthcare thing. Federal government trying to push responsibilities down to local taxpayers, because if everyone ends up going to the emergency room at their public hospital, then you and I pay as New York City taxpayers for that.
Right.
And we're already sending a lot more money to Washington. We get back a lot more money to Albany. We got to understand that this attempt by the Republicans, it's not neutral. It will end up hitting everyday New Yorkers in the pocketbook, too.
Mayor de Blasio, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time and your honesty. And, you know, everybody's watching this thing play out, so I know the heat is on you right now. You can always check in here. How do you feel? Do you feel under pressure?
I feel resolute, Ebro. I feel resolute. I think, look, it's a moment of change. Even though the Trump election was a tough pill to swallow, and these things we're seeing in Washington, like trying to take away people's health insurance, are very depressing. I think underneath that, a lot is changing. People getting mobilized, people understanding a lot more about what they've got to do. I think this is prelude to a lot of bigger, more positive changes. So I feel very resolute. And my view is, let's get in this fight. You know, remember, I always tell people on January 21st, we saw the biggest demonstrations for women's rights and equality, but the biggest demonstrations of any kind in the history of the United States. People mobilized in all 50 states simultaneously. It was breathtaking. That kind of energy now needs to be brought to bear to save health care and to stop all these tax cuts for the wealthy, and then to win elections in 2018 and 2020.
There you go, Mayor de Blasio, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, man. Thank you.
All right.